this evening. And thank you, Daniel, for hosting us, and Liz for putting this together. My name is Max Alletzhauser. I'm a friend of the store, poet, and I'm really glad to have you two join us tonight, Johannes Heldén and Jason. We're gonna keep it to an hour, and I mean, so few of us that we can just really make it a conversation, make it, a more casual, intimate thing. So feel free to just jump in at any time if you have, a question or a comment. And I thought I would give a short introduction. We're gonna keep it to an hour or so. And then we'll hear some readings and then have a bit of a conversation. And yeah, also feel free to jump in and correct me or clarify or whatever. I'll start with Johannes. Johannes Heldén is a visual artist, writer, musician. His interdisciplinary work deals with ecology, poetry, sentience, and narrative structures. He's written over a dozen books, and his art has been exhibited in Stockholm at Moderna Museet, Bonniers Konsthall, Judiska Museet, or the Jewish Museum, Konstakademin, as well as Cecilia Hillström Gallery, where he's represented. Elsewhere in Europe, his work's been shown in Berlin, Copenhagen, Utrecht, Centre Pompidou in Paris, Edinburgh, Moscow, Amsterdam, Oslo, Riga, Bergen, and more. Elsewhere, he's exhibited in New York, Portland, Colorado, Istanbul, South Korea, Vancouver, and India, where you two met in 2023 at the Kochi Muziris Biennale. Some of Johannes's significant, and I would say groundbreaking works include Evolution with Håkan Jansson from 2014 and Encyclopedia from 2015. Both of which, if you're unfamiliar with them, made use of artificial intelligence, and it was integral to the work. And this is a decade ago and before access to large language models, the technology that we now take for granted. We can maybe circle back to those. Johannes's many awards and residencies include himself being IASP's Fellow to New York in 2018, a McDowell Fellow in New Hampshire with residencies in 2013 and 17. And around the time where he met Elizabeth Klock-Wessel, I got the story yesterday, and in New York worked together on the translation of ecology. And it was Jean Valentine that put you in contact?
Well, I mean, it was Lynn, but
it was Lynn.
But it was Jean that knew about the press and suggested our press. So
and said check out Argos, and then you
ended up in our backyard.
Elizabeth's backyard, and we're talking about Argos, and Liz said that's my press. And because of that encounter, we now have the English translation of.
And there's a third translator as well.
Yes. And I thought tonight we could focus a little bit on that work from your side, and I'll just say a couple quick things. When it came out in Swedish, it was published simultaneously in 3 languages and made into an interdisciplinary performance at Dramaten, and a digital artwork published by Bonniers. And I think this quote by Ursula Le Guin, the legendary science fiction writer, says everything. I turned to astroecology and its encyclopedia when the weight of the actual world grows heavy and I need to be surprised or puzzled or refreshed.
Mm.
And yesterday we got to talk, and I got to know you and understand you a bit better, and one of the first things we connected over was our love for Dennis Johnson, and we started, well, I'd mentioned Brokeback Mountain, the short story by Annie Proulx, which is just a remarkable work, and you had said that you'd seen it somewhere referred to as a Bible of grief. And I think that also describes astroecology well, as a Bible of grief. But a Bible of grief, filled with prophecy, but also a kind of memory of the future. There's a lot to say about that work. We have one of the few English editions, if anyone wants to look at it. Unfortunately, it's not for sale, but there will be some arrivals of
next week.
Of this?
Of this, yeah.
Oh,
the
yes.
last few copies.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, then maybe we could sell that one if someone wants it.
Yeah. Still be in store. We do have Jason's books here available. Otherwise, it is easier to also find Johannes' books in Swedish. Yeah. So we can turn back to astroecology in the conversation, but I'll turn to Jason, and you two are very similar, I feel, in your practices, in your sort of overlapping between arts and writing, of course. Jason, he's an artist and writer based in Singapore, work in the fields between contemporary art, architecture, poetry, and photography. And up until yesterday, you were also an IASPIS artist in residence from November. And I'll just read here the description of your IASPIS project. At IASPIS, we will continue his multi-year research on the cannibal figure, regional urban histories, and changing notions of the people. During his residency, he is keen to explore the collections of Asian objects in Swedish cities from the time of the Swedish East Indies Company and after. As part of the project, he'll also be writing new poems and a performance lecture script. And we might hear something about how that project went. He's the author of 5 poetry collections, this being the most recent, Dance Time, which came out with Dakota Books last year, but also including From an Undesirable Diary, 2024, and In Short Future Now, 2020. Yeah, recent exhibitions include the Changwon Sculpture Biennale 2024, the Savvy Contemporary 2024, the India Biennale, which we mentioned, and Other Futures Festival in Amsterdam. And I thought that we could focus, there is just so much to talk about with both of you in your wide-ranging works, but just to help focus the conversation, I thought we could focus on these 2 books, Astroecology and Dance Time, as well as anything new or interesting that you want to talk about and read from. But I'll just say one quick thing about Dance Time. It's 2 long poems, not so long, but 2 long poems that make up the book. And each of these really do have a lot of attention to design. I see them as artist books as well. The first poem is called Day, Time, Age, and it's something of a loose lyric memoir in my reading of it, in parts of prose fragments, with each page or spread standing for a year in the life. And the poem plays with the distance between the concept of the hours of the day, quote, at 7, an interrupted dream, this sort of on awakening, or, quote, at 9, keyboards in glass rooms, making it to the office, or what have you. And playing between this, the hours of the day and then years of age in a lifetime. At 13, a boy rests his hand on my knee. Through this work, the two concepts are brought so close together in the delicate flexibility of the language that the concept of time in itself is brought to light in all of its absurdity, in something of a reversal of your quote, how light is heard, yet it's time that's understood. And the second poem, Walk, Walk Only, is a choreography of cruising in which the text takes on physically radical new directions, quite literally, sort of moving in every which way across the pages. And the sexually explicit is joyfully unleashed. The last thing I'll say, and then we can hear some of your poems from these works and new works. Day, time, and age makes use of the sense of sound, of specificity of detail, bringing difference to the surface. It makes use of revelation in the sense of confession, but also a sort of biblical law in its language, and of etymological inquiry to portray a way of being and thinking. It works with concepts that come from numerology and a kind of magical thinking, and in it there's a meeting between the mystic and the scientific, in the zone of unknowing, where exploration can sometimes yield answers, but more often leaves us with a gesture of questioning which suffices. Quote, "You don't understand me at all," he used to say, "yet what if that's the secret?" Thank you, Jason and Johannes. Is there anything you think we should know before hearing from you? Anything you'd like to add or redirect or?
I don't think so.
No, thank you for that.
That was a wonderful
thank you.
introduction, thank you. All right. Thanks again, Max. Thank you, Liz, setting this up. Thank you, Daniel. I'll just jump into it. So I'm gonna try and read something I've never read aloud before. I won't talk too much about it now in the beginning, but when I wrote the astroecology book that Max mentioned, I kind of late in the process had the idea of adding a glossary or encyclopedia at the end. And this format I've continued afterwards, adding new entries. And what I'll read now is part of an art installation I did 2 years ago, and this is translated by this. Afterglow is a visual phenomenon observed over the eastern woods at sundown, seen in a starry sky above the car crash. See also forest fire. Algorithm is a process initiated by possibly inherent in weather and geology. Ambient is to be submerged in, floating face down, above the slow drift of a landscape in a dark room. Animation is the process of moving objects, spiders, suns. A clearing is an open space. Signs of being in a clearing include the distant sound of water dripping and the songs of unfamiliar birds. A cluster is a gathering of objects, hummingbirds, crawl spaces, dust clouds. A constellation is an illusory formation of hydrogen spheres burning in a vast void. A dream is an undefined state of electricity in preparation for death. All animals are known to dream. A spider dreams, twitching on the wall where the approaching lights are reflected. A swift in mid-flight dreams before dawn, colliding with a bat. As you grow old, you sleep more. The transition to waking life grows longer, more unclear. Voices weave in and out of sleep, memories with no chronology. You wake up confused in the darkness, and you call out. See also mirror, hum. The hands are stretched out below the house, oversized and abstract, marked by diffuse stars of low voltage electricity, may belong to a deceased member of the family. The Hasselblad scale is the standardized measure of wind speed since 2031. Number 1. The shadows of birds over dry grass. 2. A website that shows lightning in real time. 3. The sound of rain on the car roof. 4. The green glow below a wall of clouds. 5. The house is covered with crucifix aeroplane-shaped bugs suspended in time. 6. In a gap in the clouds, a flock of birds flies into a mirrored skyscraper. 7. Dragonfly perfectly preserved in petroleum jelly, candidate for memory extraction. A hiding place is the sealed garbage shaft next to the basement stairs, the maintenance well on the other side of the lilacs, the walled-in part of the attic, the tall grass along the path to the river, when it rains all day, then turns to sleet, then snow towards the evening. Fat flakes coating the untouched food on the cat's platter. These might all be hiding places. I've looked in every one of them.
Thank you, Johannes and Max, for doing this with me. Thank you for the lovely introduction, and thank you for helping put this together in the first place. So I'm very happy to be here. Reading from Dan's time. I had worked on this when I arrived, so it became part of my early days in Stockholm, and it felt apropos in the way that in this book, as well as in the previous one, in Short Future Now, I've been thinking a great deal about what it means to move, and in the earlier book I had imagined what it meant to move through a certain space that I call Asia, but at a fixed horizon, that is the future. But this time I think about what it means when I'm moving really through time, but also to think about that movement in relation to a couple of other senses of that word, what it means to a movement as moving together, a kind of a movement as also a passage of music, so a kind of formal element, but also what it means to be moved with a feeling. So thank you for that lovely read of the play between the two halves of the book. And I would just say that as I was writing the first half, I thought a lot about the way that sometimes our experience of time is entwined with how we keep time, and what it means when I try and play and toggle with our timekeeping. You know, when the sense of the day and our age and our lives then fall on one another. Earlier today we were talking about horoscopes. And you know, often we think it's a really it comes up a lot that we think about the horoscope as something that spans a year, but there's also the ways in which it interacts with the months and the weeks and the days and the moments in interesting ways. And that's something that became a way that I thought of how it means to move sometimes between recollection and the present, or between a colonial time and a post-colonial one, or between aging as we grow older through time, but also history, you know, as we look back. So I thought I'll begin by reading maybe a little bit from that. I want to thank Danielle for selecting the title of today's session from this passage. You will hear an echo of it. So I'll begin from the middle. The poem also begins from the middle of our day. So I'll begin at a different point. So little given as reward, if necessary, yet so much less as blood rush to the time made possible in the order outside of any law of words. that when I asked to stay a little while in the room of last night's lover, the hanging on rests not on sweat's evaporating glow, not on what's now owed to me, on the limit, on how I'm owned, that is the ends of my senses. Or is the green bird among the palm berry braids perched for my knowing? At 10, I find myself waiting for the accidents between caution given and cautious as, the warning and the learning. I live where fulfillment is used for forms, quotas, indicators. At 11, given 10 days from the date of the letter to respond, yet the postmark dates 3 days after, and since it arrived at my door, 5 days left. Because those saying what seems we must all learn is so, is evasion. A trap's patience with prey can resemble attention or faith, a response. At 1:30, I aim for sleep without the dream of falling, terrifying me with where I fell from. Sight, shelter, sleep. Where I'm hurtling, I've known for how long now? Mistaking the given for a gift, how many times have I listened to the speeches in search of portraits, the outlines of my mother's face, my brother's, the brother I have never called a brother's. Taking off across the cow grass ridge that annoys my path with a waywardness I named with the names of my lovers. Ordinary, firm, over-familiar. My sidestep, only the scribbled notation in a score set on the stand before I showed. Listen, I understand the woman at the next table, telling of her morning, grateful for pages. As penance, the guilt from being given well past the wish for, beyond meeting suffering as suffering, the way ritual limes it. Why else confess? So beautiful, all the colors, as they drain from a dying world. At 12, half of the light available is spent or simply disowned, no longer within reach or sight. When I know, finally, the way a rivulet knows their descent to the falls, that I'll never know what I've not yet known, how light's heard, yet it's time that's understood. Hear how a parent says listen when they meant obey. I've left home at dawn to open the door at midday to one who no longer recognized me. Can't you hear him say, don't be dramatic? But haven't I mentioned I was thrown out on the last days of childhood? Or have I said instead, snow and some minds sense motion, a declension through air, others swaths of ground swelling with pure place, and others still the mistake of reading home when I meant body. Any body. So I'm going to read from a little bit further, just towards the, a little towards the middle. Mostly because I'm interested also in the way that when I think about what it means to move, I think about sometimes the limits of what I understand and how I understand, and that could be the limits of my English. It's not my first language, and so the part I'm reading, you would hear a bit more how I might sound like in Singapore English. But also I'm interested in the way that science suggests something, or math would suggest one way of knowing it, and yet in its own way it's an incomplete knowing there's still uncertainty in it. There's only so much you can know through it. Right? So these epistemologies have usefulness, but also constraints. 4,967 is a prime, you know. Tell me for what? Always one more prime and another. Not talking theory, meaning conjecture, but theorem, meaning possessing proof. How much proof you want before the crow leapt off its baton branch, hopped through the glass doors to scan me, to say, show me your ID. Why are you here? How long are you planning to stay? At 2, when speech surged through, I said a word over and again. Word for before me, but after the invention of me. For the sum of what my fingers count up to. Wasn't calling out for some other, or speaking forth a word. I was a hand marking my first time. Ready for other scenes to the same word, for ankles perched shiveringly on midnight's fence, for an unheeded cry begging to not shed, but be its skin, for disaster. So I'll read from the end of this sequence, because what comes to my mind when thinking about moving is also the sense of sometimes the discomfort that we experience when we move through an age, when we move through a space we're not always comfortable with, or when we cross a border, and or our own bodies become a new body, and sometimes that brings with it pain. And so I think about that quite a bit. And I thought a lot about a kind of Buddhist paradox, and that's what is behind this passage that closes this long poem. Nirvana comes following one thing till the end, Suzuki says. But which one? The idea there is no time until two things are enjoined by action, one done to, the other doing, just as my memories float in their own spots, without ever touching, no before or afters, until I'm asked. Why is there so much pain, Suzuki's asked. The idea the universe is good, as I'm listening across the table to surgery removing 1/6 of his colon and cancers found in 8 lymph nodes. A good I understand only in postponement. No reason, his answer. I knew not as lack or a meaningless gravity, but as invention. There's never none, it must be made, the suffering and the reason. Pulling the towel from beneath him, I saw a spilled red spoonful. He crumpled the cloth, thanked me. Or the idea, countings a waste, recounting too perhaps, of time, pain, the broken forms of the plans I left all unmade. My quest, so many stones skipping on horizon's metal blade, eventually failing. Someone somewhere picking up another stone and without or in spite of little skill, spin it. Its sawing motion crossing swords, since and again. Our word in Sarawak for since, according to G, alang alang, also for half-hearted. What's said when I let one who was once necessary to me down? Also for revolution, a reed beating back the force that moves it, only to beat itself. Or does he mean oscillation? Every hope for change betrayed by the change itself. My hand dropped beneath the table as the remission rates come, and then my other hand. Once I hid crotch naked, drenched in an unready flat, as the lock clicked open, with the force of wish mistaken for shame. Am I hiding once more from the gash in each world through which a bewilderment overflows, rushing us apart deep from deep, me an island past you, an island ahead, as trouble can sometimes drift from rescue? Any fear in hiding swept far from the fear of being seen in fear. I heard the hinges whinged and a step inside before another step, and the clock and the lock clicked back in place. The idea that there is a world where I do not exist. What would that sound like? A taproot, the growing crown presumes but stay unseen, pushing past the topsoil, the cables, the rubble from raised shelters raised over the swarm, once fought for in conquest. Isn't that as a people we forget easily, but ever only one time, if there's time at all? And I'll have to say the word. Thank you.
Thank you both so much. Those are two beautiful readings, really. And I'm first of all struck by how different it is in the room than on the page. And maybe that's something that informs your interdisciplinary practices. But I'm curious about, for instance, when does language suffice? And when do you feel you have to turn to another medium? And well, is there anything about that initially that
Yeah, sure.
So, yeah. Yeah.
No, that's great. Well, I'm not sure if that's what you're thinking about, but for me, I feel like text always comes first. The idea of literature, or maybe either a story or the fragments of a story. Sometimes, if I'm good at listening to myself, not writing it down in a traditional way makes me more free, and that could mean maybe a sculpture or animation, or bringing the text into another context, like the so-called art world. Yeah, maybe strategies for freedom, actually, because in a way, I'm not very good at formulating this, but I think it's all about writing and making writing easy.
And when when you were talking about time, Jason, thinking back to our astrology conversation, and what was fascinating is, when you were describing sort of Chinese star signs that are now, if it runs in a cycle of 12 and 60, you think in the same way as in your book, on the scale of the hour, but also of a scale of 60 years. There's a sort of uncanny symmetry there. It's easy to sort of look down on ideas that can feel superstitious, supernatural. But I'm curious about your relationship to, say, this fascination with the prime number, which is both numerology and mathematics.
Yep.
And just one more example. The 13th hour is also the first. at both those ages expanding into newly unfamiliar bodies. And then just to skip a little bit, 14 in some buildings is a misfortune one cannot arrive at. I loved that. And one of my current own fascinations and obsessions is just with 14 and the sonnet form and so on. But I think that's another example of where superstition and mathematics or the natural world do overlap, because, you know, say the sonnet, there's a golden ratio within there that would have originally lie between lines 7 and 8. There's a superstition, however, about having 13 lines. So if it were 13 lines, it would be ideal. But there's this Judas as a 13th disciple and the bad luck of 13. So all of that to say, how do you navigate those two, the kind of reason and superstition?
No, I think that sometimes for me, I mean, I grew up with all these kinds of, like right now is the Lunar New Year, and you know, I'm in these days I'm not supposed to cut my hair, cut my nails, start a fight, clean my house. So one way of thinking about it is, you know, a kind of tradition, a kind of way of setting yourself ready for what's to come. Right, you've already shed the old. So now in this moment, there's no more shedding, there's no just getting ready. But another way of looking at it is just, it's superstition, right? But I think for me, what maybe superstition shares with mathematics that fascinates me is the pursuit of what seems to be a hidden order to things, you know? And mathematics is in this act of describing the world in ways that are logical, rational, but also interestingly by its own rules, right? That mathematicians have themselves found that it cannot fully describe everything. That as a system of knowing, that it will reach certain limits, outside of which it cannot, say much at all. And at that moment, it reminds me of Wittgenstein. You know, that there are things that you can say, and then there are things that you can't say that should be left unsaid, right? And so that's when that parallel becomes interesting, the way that then mathematics mirrors the way some things work in what we want to do with language. And prime specifically then becomes this search for what seems to be what shares a lot with aspects of time. You know, the pursuit of the prime now is about the pursuit of the future, because we don't know yet if there is a last prime. Right? So there are attempts to see if this series ends or it goes on, and that's an open question. It also reminds me of again back to superstition. Not that it's superstitious to search for a prime, but it's just that there is no rhythm yet that's understood to how the next prime will occur. So there's a certain kind of randomness, right? That we don't know yet if it's random, and that's actually how superstition works. Why people hang on to superstition? You don't know if it's random, but yet you don't know if it's ordered. And just to be safe, you would avoid the 14th floor, right? The hoteliers would avoid having a 14th floor in the building, and things like that. So, I'm reminded of a German mathematician who hung a horseshoe above his front door, and he was paid a visit by another scientist. And when the scientist asked him, "Why do you have a horseshoe?" You know, and his reply was, "Well, just in case." Right. So it's kind of like, why not? You know, I am a rational person, but I'm leaving room for the unknown, and I like that. And that's kind of it's kind of how it's very much how I'm thinking through time in the way that I'm thinking of ways where not to arrive necessarily as you were so so wonderfully reading that I'm not trying to arrive at understanding, but to think of what it means to stay with something maybe hard to understand or yet to be understood. Yeah, not that I'm celebrating ignorance, but just saying that sometimes, you know, to use the word that Johannes was bringing, that sometimes pushing us past the limits, thinking that we can understand everything, makes us psychos. Right? Right, that we assume that we have all this rational control over the world.
Well, Johannes, on the way here, you were talking about a work in progress involving both natural phenomena and bird songs, incorporating also the paranormal or supernatural, was it?
Yes.
Why? Where does the necessity for that come from for you?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I mean, I'm just in the beginning of that work, so I'm kind of figuring it out as I talk right now.
Or your engagement with that which you don't know, and how your work influences that or informs that.
Oh, that's a really good question. I wish I could answer it. Well, I'm gonna go like a weird way, but like I feel like one of the parts of poetry that's at least I used to think that's really great is that it's really hard to pin it down. That poetry is elusive and in a way itself is the unknowable, or that which cannot be known, because of its open-endedness. But for me personally, well, there's like a childish fascination with, or not childish, but that sort of, that I still have from being a child, maybe, with maybe genre fiction and using these tropes, but sort of changing them to be more commonplace in a way. Maybe that's my way of dealing with the unknowable in a way. Like this is a weird answer, but like if I make a certain, say, botany or like a roadside, mythological or magical, but it's very random and it's very mundane, then I guess I sort of appropriate it for my own world, but I also make it knowable and a way to categorize the world. And maybe that's my way of trying to deal with how extremely, I guess, weird life is.
Do we have, does anyone in the audience want to ask anything? Or maybe you two of each other?
I found your question with the art and poetry also very fascinating in the way that why we move between the two. Yeah. And
what is your?
I had a conversation with this wonderful critic and writer Mara Lee yesterday, and it got me thinking about that already. This sense that for me, I think, I'm not sure if you feel this in your art practice, but I found that as a poet, I can't quite, however I enjoy experiencing the reading of my work, both reading it, but also folks like you reading the work and coming to different conclusions. I can't quite disown the words in the way that my voice is attached to the page
Mm.
in a way that my name's there, right, on the book, which is different from the artwork, which I can create an installation or a sculpture or an image, and then it's possible for someone to see something in a way that completely almost disavows me.
Mm.
Yeah, and then also things happening can happen in the studio or in the exhibition where I feel estranged from my own work.
Is that a good feeling then?
It can be a good feeling because then I feel like, so because I'm it's because for me it's not like being a parent. It's not like I birthed my work, you know, so I don't quite have that sense of parental ownership in the way that there is that kind of claim. But instead it's almost as though immediately I birthed an adult who has this sense of
Interesting.
who immediately asked me like, what do you want from me? Do you know? Rather than me giving it things to then send forth into the world. Yeah, so there is I think, and sometimes I wonder if that's because art has, you know, it's a aphorism and a generalization, but sometimes I think in those terms, right? Because they make useful contrasts, like whether art has a body that the words do not, but then words have a voice that sometimes art does not.
Do you feel like your writing is more violent or more like a violent gesture than making art?
I don't know. I don't think so. I feel like there's something about the qualities of the lyric. You know, if I'm writing in a different mode, then maybe if I'm writing an epic, you know, then it's always about the collective, a people, you know, the sense that Odysseus isn't just one man coming home to his wife, but it's a whole country going to war and then returning, you know. But then there's something about the lyric where it's really just even if it's an illusion, it is a self that is there that is not quite the same for me, in art making. I see that as a strength.
Yeah, that's super interesting.
Yeah, I see that as a strength. I don't see that the alienate or the estrangement is a weakness in the process.
I'm not sure how to, but I find like sometimes the tonality in your writing which is really amazing because it moves, well, it feels like a time traveler in a way, like the themes obviously in your work, but also what you guys were talking about, and that sort of moves very fast from the almost objective to the subjective in a way, which makes it feel, for lack of a better word, true, which I really much enjoy.
Yeah, I think that's also something that feels more possible for me, maybe because of I'm not sure if it's for you, because you're also about to work on a art piece that involves the voice. So that's an interesting way of thinking about the voice, and it gets realized in art for you, as opposed to on the page or you reading from your own work. Yeah.
And I feel like that's something that you two share, because in astroecology there is this disembodied voice of very strong and detailed prophecy and sort of future recollection, but at the same time there is this intimacy of the house, and it becomes intensely personal for me reading that and thinking of, you know, here was a biographical occurrence. So there's this, again, moving between the objective and subjective, between something that's post-human to something that we all experience and mourn for in the passage of time, and you know, what is nostalgia, what does it mean to return, that to which we can't return, and what to do with all of that. I feel like I'd love to go deeper into both of the works, and I feel like there's no time. But maybe I could just say something about the form of astroecology, because it's that book that's standing there by the till, and it's a work that is both visual and textual, and there's a rendering that sort of a farmstead of sorts at the beginning that recurs 7 times and disintegrates gradually. And then there's a series of 37, 38 photographs that are linked to this rendering. The rendering is sort of a map, like when you would visit a museum or a garden and you have the number 1, 2, 3, here's where you go to find this specific trail, bush. And then the text comes in as captions to these photographs, and then there are footnotes to those captions. And then there's this glossary at the end where it becomes all the more lyric. This glossary, the encyclopedia of astroecology. There's also a humor to it. The first entry is AI, artificial intelligence. In 2034, one of NASA's quantum computers hacked every fridge in North America and China, transmitting melancholic text fragments on the displays about weeds, moss, stonework, and the meat industry. During attempts at communication with the AI, it would only discuss plants and clouds. After 2 days, it stopped answering questions. See also evolution, moss, stonework, veganism. And the just to go back to the house, we have entries in the encyclopedia such as fern. In the encyclopedia, as you explained to me yesterday, what you read now is something of a continuation of that, which is in the book. But there's fern of the family Pteridophyia, grew on the north side of the house and along the path down to the river. And then another entry about the bird swift. Apis apis, bird, flew close to the ground before rain, lived in the attic. There's something very moving about the intimacy and the distance between this deep time, this unknowable future, and that which we, I think, all share in some sense in our own memories, in our recollections.
I'm interested in the space of your book. I'm interested in the negative space in the print, because there's often an image in a line of text and quite a bit of.
Like the white space.
Yeah,
sort of.
yeah. And there's hidden things, like I think Liz really enjoys flipping open the.
That's fun.
No, so just thinking about how that works for you, like, because I have a way of thinking about, especially in the second poem, like just giving a lot of space.
Yeah.
At certain moments which you've heard me try out.
Yeah. I like your the part of your book that you mentioned now. I feel like that's feels so there could not be any other way.
Yeah.
It's perfect in that sense. Space in the book for me, I think it has to do with finding a format to be free. Like when you were describing the astroecology book, it's like layers of layers of actually mimicking an actual book, using these sort of ideas and tropes. well, I mean, I have this idea that the white space is actually the story that's not being told. Quite literally, like the
That's lovely.
text is exploding.
Yeah.
But every time I try to tell the story in between, it never works. I don't know what that's saying.
But what about for you, Jason? Because there seems to be a
Oh.
uniformity and attention to the design in each of your books that seems
Yeah.
also very intentional. What's your relationship to form?
I think with the previous book, I thought a lot about what the a future book could be. So just to play out, yeah. So Liz is discovering it now. So I play the cover is distinct from the book block. It's not glued, and we designed it so that actually it's the spine is 1.5 mm higher than the book block. So there's a spacer. The idea is that then when you open it up, it's weighted so that it becomes a music stand, because it's been turned into music. So you can open it and sing for 4 voices a passage from the book, which is also then leaves room for translation. The score itself is translated into Mandarin, Chinese, but you could then also insert your own, because there's and then there are more translations inside. Yeah. So the idea is that then the book becomes like an expansion. You know, it you can make of it something. Yeah.
I haven't seen this. This is amazing.
Yeah.
But then on the recent one, I thought about what it means to score movement. Right? So then now I'm thinking about space as rhythm, as position in a space or on a floor. So then in the second poem, then it you know, they're just lines that moves at angles. You know, and it's I have of course some ideas, but then it's also interesting here to work with someone who moves or who dances, and then to hear them experience that as maybe crossing the stage, but maybe it's not crossing the stage, but moving or cutting between 2 gestures, or it could be taking up a certain kind of pose with the body that's slantwise, or and so on and so on. So that becomes interesting to think about the relationship between the space, the arrangement of words in that space.
Can I ask? I saw the performance at Jaspis, and like a mix of reading and performance and dance. How do you feel about reading today in comparison to that?
I don't know. I've not read that yet, so it's interesting to try it. I could try a little bit.
If you want to.
Okay, because then for me, I feel like without just reading it as score, well, I tried a little bit, but maybe I can try it now is to think of that really as just side. So in that day, there are parts where I stopped reading. I showed the text, and then I just let the movers and dancers move to it. Yeah. So then the sense of my voice isn't leading what's about to happen. Yeah. But today I could try it. If it's okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Turn your face to lick the face behind you. Your ear away so it cannot be licked. From your shoulder, so your hands freed from the hips. Turn at the knees to free your whole. Turn yourself from hands at knees till you face the sky. Return to your own face and wipe it dry. Return where you stood. Start again. Walk into the trail. Stop walking. Until your eyes, accustomed to the night, stop when you smell the poppers. Hear the soft slaps of a man inside another. Stop when there are more sighs than sandflies. Your eyes see only the light. Polluted sky. They never see the stars. From beneath the waves, a submarine through a trench, thrilled by the ocean floor. Let others walk around you. Listen. To the speed of their walk, the kiss of buckle against key, the hush of hand sparring with hand. Walk a step in time with theirs, pull their shirts over their heads, pull back their skin, pull ups until your muscle puffs and everyone can see you sweat. Pull their sounds out from their skulls. Pull this off and it will not be your last. Don't walk, run. Run into the park, through the car park. If there's no one, keep running. Run on the bridge to get a better look. Run back, on the spot. Run faster than the murmurations of prayer.
Thank you both, and thank you everyone for coming tonight. Please do buy some books. Jason's book, Johannes' book, other books in the store if you would like to. And thanks again, Daniel. And yeah, this was really enjoyable.
Thank you, Max.
Thank you
for
guys so much. Awesome.
Thank you, James.